This one has a giant lead sheet over top of it to block the radioactive emission. In this drawer, we have rocks that can kill you because they're asbestos. This mineral or rock is called chrysotile. It's a type of asbestos, and these fibers get into your lungs, and if they accumulate, they'll kill you. This is that mineral chrysotile that we just looked at that they make into asbestos, and it's those little fibers that get into the air and they stay entrained or floating in the air for relatively long periods of time, and it gets stuck in your lungs. This is a rock called bertrandite. It's an ore of beryllium. Beryllium is a mineral that's used in high-strength metals, but beryllium metal itself is highly toxic to people. Touching the rock itself won't harm you, but if you were to process this into the beryllium metal, touching the beryllium metal, the native element, that's what's toxic. It's absorbed through the skin, and it interferes with biological functions. So this silvery looking mineral is called stibnite. It's an ore of a metal called antimony. Antimony, the element, is what's toxic to people. The mineral stibnite isn't, but if you were to crush this up and ingest it somehow, you would get antimony poisoning. It used to be commonly used in cosmetics 5,000 or so years ago. Yeah, we don't use it in cosmetics anymore, but they would use it for eyeshadow, eyeliner, things like that. Conocalcite, or conochalcite, depending on how you want to pronounce it. It's an ore of copper, but it also contains arsenic in it. And you can see this one, it dehydrated and became a powder, and that powder is what's dangerous because you could inhale it. We have a mineral called energite. The mineral energite is an ore of copper. The problem is if it's not carefully handled, that arsenic in it can get into your system and kill you. It's the mineral cinnabar. It's mercury sulfide. There's two reasons why it's really bad. First of all, it has the native element mercury in it, which is highly toxic to living things. Second of all, it's a mineral class called a sulfide, which is relatively soluble in water. So if I were to put this in water, some of that would dissolve, and if I were to drink that water, I would expose myself to mercury. The mineral realgar looks very similar to the cinnabar that we just looked at. The difference is that instead of being a mercury sulfide mineral, this one is an arsenic sulfide mineral. So again, if you were to powder this and ingest it or breathe the powder in, you've exposed yourself to arsenic poisoning, and over time it'll kill you. Orpiment is another mineral that contains arsenic. You can see it's this really pretty yellowy orange. This one has some realgar, which is the red, mixed in with it. They commonly occur together because they're both arsenic sulfide minerals. Orpiment and realgar were commonly used several thousand years ago as dyes or pigments for makeup. So people would powder this and they would put it on their faces and they would die. This is a uranium mineral called carnotite. It's a bright yellow, again, very colorful, but because it contains uranium, it has some radioactivity to it. Just touching it for long periods, even putting it in your pocket and leaving it there for a couple days can cause health issues. If I were to put this in my pocket for 2 or 3 days, I would probably go sterile. So this is the mineral chalcanthite. It's a hydrated copper sulfate. It only forms in humid environments, so caves or parts of the world where there's a lot of humidity in the air. When it dries out or desiccates, it turns to this light blue powder. The hazard here is that when it becomes a powder like that, it can be entrained into the air and you could breathe it in and potentially expose yourself to copper poisoning. Samarskite, strongly radioactive. Put it in your pocket for a day, all the hair will die, and you will probably be sterile. And then longer term exposure, it'll start to damage your tissues, like your skin, muscles, things like that. This one has a giant lead sheet over top of it to block the radioactive emission. there's just more radioactivity that comes off of it versus a small hand specimen. We process the uranium ore into a material called yellow cake. That's enriched uranium ore right there. Yellow cake is the start of making atomic bombs, which kill everybody.